Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of the Coffee and Carbuncles podcast. If you're listening to this because you are a fan of Fish or Fruity and know absolutely nothing about this podcast, I humbly welcome you to my show. If you are here because you got through Season 1 and went, yeah, I think I'd like another season of that, then welcome back. I'm delighted to see you again. Now, regardless of why you are hearing this, I hope you'll enjoy the podcast. Please find a nice chair or couch or even your bed, get comfortable with a warm drink, and please enjoy episode 1 of the second season of Coffee and Carbuncles. Great. 7 hours of fishing and not a single bite.
Are you okay, friend?
I guess I would be better if any fish would actually... Wait, you're fruity snacks!
Yeah, but you don't want to yell so loud. You'll scare away the fish.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'm pretty sure there aren't any.
Oh, let me see your fishing rod and tackle here. Maybe you aren't using the right ones.
Okay, here you go.
Yep. That's what I thought. You don't have the right stuff. Here, try this.
Thanks, man. All right. Okay, let's try this again. Something's biting. I got one, Fruity. Hold on. It's
It's what?
Actually, what is this? It looks kind of big for a fish.
That's a ruby dragon, and you got it your first try?
Oh, is that what it is? Don't worry, Fruity. Tell you what. Why don't you drop by the cafe later, and maybe I can give you some pointers on how I caught it. So, after catching the ruby dragon, Fruity showed me how to gut and clean it. I'll spare you the details on that part, but it was certainly an experience. He then also agreed to come by the cafe this evening. I never thought I would meet such a legendary fisherman, but I guess it's a small world. You never really know who you'll run across. Now that I think about it, I still owe him for the fishing rod and bait, though. Seems his coffee's on the house this evening. When he gets here, I'll make sure to introduce you to him. I think you'd really like him. Oh, look, he's he. Huh? Pardon? What is with the wind chimes, you ask? What happened to the doorbell? Well, you see, people had a lot of issues with the loud bells on the door, so I thought I'd try putting a wind chime next to it instead. This way, when people come in, the breeze blows the wind chimes instead of having an annoying loud bell. Not completely sure how I feel about it so far, but we'll see. It's an adjustment. For those that don't know, my guest today, many of you will know him from his amazing YouTube channel. Some may also know him from the Eorzean Aquarium. But, to make a point of how legendary of a fisher my guest is, rumor has it Yoshi P himself invited today's guest to the Square Enix headquarters in Tokyo, but at the last minute had to rescind the offer because the fishermen of Tokyo threatened to go on strike if he entered Japan's territorial waters. They said the competition would just be too stiff with him in the area. Please welcome Fruity Snacks.
It was one time, Japan. I swear, it was just one time.
I just hope that someday you and those fishermen can resolve things peacefully.
Yeah, we kind of left on a sour note, but I do hope that we'll make amends here soon. Have to let the waters cool, so to speak.
Well, at any rate, Fruity, good afternoon, man. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on. Now, before we jump into things, I want to know, what are you drinking today for this interview? And by the way, before you answer, just so you know, if it's not out of an Eorzea's Best Fisherman cup, I'm going to be sad.
It is, in fact, a bottle of water. It's my reusable bottle of water. But this particular bottle of water has, and let me bring it up here, has a bunch of stickers that I got at FanFest that people gave me of a bunch of fish. So like there's like a ruby dragon, a Warden of the Seven Hues, a Comatose, Iliad Scan, and Cinder Surprise, and a bunch of other ones that I got at FanFest. So it's not Eorzea's best fisher, but it's, in my mind, a suitable upgrade.
That actually sounds really neat, and I will accept that. We will compromise here, and I'll call that good for you. So, before we jump into talking about fishing in 14, why don't you share with us a bit about your background outside of the game? Where do you hail from?
I'm from the northeast of the U.S. I like to say the greater New York City area. So I'm about like an hour and a half out of New York City. Completely nowhere near a coastline, if that matters or is surprising at all. But plenty of rivers nearby. And I've been in. I haven't been in this particular region, but I have been in the Northeast for my entire life. So yeah, East Coast U.S., the best coast.
And everyone from California just became a little bit more spiteful, but that's fine.
I'm okay with that.
So, any non-fishing hobbies that you want to share with us before we dive in?
I mean, outside of just playing video games in general, I fish. I mean, that really is kind of it. If I'm not fishing, I'm like learning something new, I guess is probably what I'll do. Watching movies, TV shows. I'm not really a film buff kind of guy, but I do appreciate watching like older films to see how they were done. Beyond that, build with Lego, usual nerdy things.
Any particular genre of film you enjoy?
Oh, I am in the more modern take, sci-fi. I'm a big fan of sci-fi films. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, which you can argue isn't actually sci-fi, but Star Wars sci-fi films. If you go back though, like 50 years ago film, or actually at this point it would be 70 years ago film, I am a big fan of like mid 1900s monster movies. So like Godzilla, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Them is one of my all-time favorite films. Those would be, if someone's like, yo, you want to go watch like Swamp Thing, 100% down for it.
People may not know this. I'm actually a really big fan of Mothra, like classic Toho Mothra.
I'm really glad, spoiler, that Mothra made an appearance in the newest generation of Godzilla films. I haven't seen the full parts, but I have seen the parts with Mothra. So Mothra represent. Love you, Mothra.
I'm just glad not only did Mothra appear, but I feel like they did justice to Mothra. It's not like Mothra just showed up to get blasted, by an atomic breath and die out.
Yeah, no, like Mothra actually had a proper arc. It was actually kind of interesting, but I need to go back and actually finish watching all of that film. And they have like a new Godzilla movie coming out too, which I think is amazingly named. It's the prequel to the original Godzilla that they just named Godzilla -1.
There's there's a Godzilla spin-off Netflix series, and there's like 3 different movies coming out soon that feature Godzilla. So we're getting a ton of different Godzilla content.
Oh yeah, the kaiju films, film fans are eating well for the next year and a half, because I think there's the new Godzilla film, which is Godzilla -1. There's the TV show, and then there's another. And then there's one more thing, and I can't remember what it is, but yeah, there's like a ton.
Personal note, I'm actually really excited for -1. I enjoy films where Godzilla is the protagonist, but I feel like the essence of a good Godzilla film is Godzilla being this terrifying, rampaging monster, and it looks like that's what -1 is going to capture really well, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I will definitely make a note of getting out to see that, or however it is. I actually don't know where it's playing, but I will see it.
So, what brought you to Final Fantasy XIV? Do you have past experience with the franchise?
Outside of playing a Final Fantasy I emulator on my friend's phone for about 15 minutes, no. Final Fantasy XIV was my first Final Fantasy game, and I got started with it in years ago, and by years ago I mean probably it would have been about 8 years ago now, I was doing level design for Team Fortress 2 for a community update, and I had just finished a 3-day crunch session where I was wrapping up this. Me and the partner that I was working on a project with, we were just wrapping up this big project to ship out a map to Valve for them to review, and I was completely burned to a crisp because I was like, I wasn't up 24/7, but the way that it works, I had to be up at like 2 a.m. in the morning to make sure things worked, and if it didn't, I had to do it again. And I got like 2 or 3 hours of sleep over like 5 hours or 6 hours that night. It was pretty rough. But anyways, we were done. We shipped it off, and I was talking to a friend who was playing it, and this is back in 2015, I guess, 2014. I swear it was 2014, but according to the Lodestone, it was 2015. It might have been the free trial, but they were like, why don't you go download the free trial and like just give it a shot? And so I did that. I made a goofy as heck looking Lalafell and started playing it. And I was enjoying it. I enjoyed it. I wasn't really too comfortable with paying the sub though, so I didn't stick with it. And it wasn't until a little while later that I was like, I need something to play. Okay, yeah, why don't I get this? And I started playing it. And I think I truly started playing Final Fantasy XIV back in like 3.2 or something like that. So I got to experience the Heaven's Ward, the Heaven's Ward title screen being the default, which is, in my opinion, like the pinnacle title screen for Final Fantasy XIV.
I really enjoyed the Heaven's Word title screen. I mean, that and the Stormblood one were both pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna potentially give like a very controversial opinion here. I think the title screens have gone downhill. I mean, it's not a very steep hill, but like it really was like Heaven's Ward was amazing. Stormblood was not as amazing, but that's mostly due to just personal preference. I prefer colder feeling things instead of Stormblood's fire. And then Shadowbringers was like, that's really cool, but also and Endwalker I genuinely am not a big fan of.
I'm actually going to agree with you. Shadowbringers, it was a really cool scene when it happened in the game. But in regards to being a loading screen, I was like, okay, cool. Two big bright walls. That's neat.
Yeah, it really was like, oh yeah, I'm going to boot the game up at 5 o'clock in the morning to play on the patch. And then you just get blinded. Like every time you booted it up, it was like a red mage doing LB3. But regardless though, like that's kind of, I started it off in Heaven's Ward. I played through Realm Reborn into Heaven's Ward off and on. I remember one of my earlier memories was not knowing what had happened. Like I didn't realize that I had finished a Realm Reborn and was starting Heaven's Ward. And I was like, I finished up a quest and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll see you in a little bit. And then like immediately went to start Heaven's Ward and Alphinode's new voice actor started. I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. What happened? And that's like one of my earliest memories. That, and then the end of Heaven's Ward where Alexander makes their first appearance and Sid is yelling to the goblins like, oh, that's not a toy, it's a bloody primal. Like those are some of my earliest memories going through the MSQ.
The Alexander raids were really neat. I was really excited to see Alexander in 14 because it's one of my favorite summons, but I thought that the way they decided to incorporate Alexander was really unique.
I found it, I think at the time I didn't really appreciate it as much, but doing like a subsequent playthrough, definitely really liked the introduction of Alexander. And I think honestly, like the introduction of, I know it's a bit off topic, but like the introduction of Alexander was good. I think Omega was probably like one of the best. Pandemonium was kind of but like the Eden raids were also really good as well.
Eden was visually really interesting because I feel like, setting aside the fact that they introduced and seemed to play around with a lot of mechanics during that raid series, I think that visually the backgrounds and the enemies you fought in Eden looked really interesting.
Yeah, Eden was the first expansion that I seriously raided in. Like, I started to try to raid during Phantom Train, which would have been '09, I think, '05. But Eden was, or not Eden, yes, Eden, Shadowbringers, was the first time that I actually sat down and rated an entire tier, and it was actually like really fun. By the end of it, I kind of was like at the point of, cool, this was really good. I don't need to do that again. I've done it. If I want to raid, I'll raid. I'll do Party Finder, like that's fine, or I'll just find some. I'll just fill in for friends. But I don't need to go through a whole tier again. That was that. I'm good. I'm done. But I think that was a, outside of doing it through Alexander, I think that was probably like the best tier to go through, live, quote unquote.
That makes sense. I rated for a bit in Eden Savage. I don't know where I stopped. It's been a while, but it was very fun. And like I said, mechanics wise, I feel like they tried out some new stuff that you really didn't see a lot of in Stormblood.
Yeah, I think that was, and I think just the fights, like who you were fighting in general, was pretty good. I still think E8S is probably one of the best raids.
That makes sense.
In my opinion, I genuinely feel like not Shiva is probably one of the best raids that they've done.
Yeah. So when do you get into fishing in 14? Like, when did you decide to jump into gathering quests in the game?
I had actually started doing botany and mining probably not almost immediately after starting seriously playing, but it definitely would have been in Heaven's Ward. But I never really reached that expansion's cap until much later. Fishing, I tried fishing. Like, I genuinely will enjoy fishing. Sorry, my cat just made a noise. I will genuinely enjoy fishing when it's in a game. Like, not even like before now, RuneScape, always enjoyed fishing. And that was like really chill. Like, you just stood there and just kneeled down and caught lobsters. Like, that's what I really like. That I'm like, this is peak gaming. And so I started leveling fishing in 14, but it was much slower because you didn't have the quests weren't scaled the same or something like that. And what was the other thing? We didn't have ocean fishing. Like, that was the other thing. Like, ocean fishing is the main way of doing leveling. And now that we have ocean fishing, that was the main way of leveling. Without ocean fishing, you had to like level through collectibles, and the way fishing collectibles worked was there was a chance that you couldn't actually get like a collectible fish, even though it was collectible. Like, the collectible rating was much different. So it was much slower. And it wasn't until Shadowbringers when I genuinely got into high gear and got everything maxed out at the max level. I did start it in roughly Heaven's Ward. I kind of did botany and mining a bit more than fishing because it was a lot more approachable for me. But it wasn't until Shadowbringers when I was like, hold on a second, fishing is actually like really dope, and really, really jumped into it. And the story of when I got really hooked on it, pun intended, is one that I've told many times. There was a little Lalafell in Gridania who was explaining how to catch the big fish near the Aetherite. Specifically, they were on the bridge near the Adder's Nest, and they were like explaining it to this one person. And I was like, can I try? And they're like, yeah, sure. And they gave me bait or told me what to get. I forget exactly. And they were like, here's how you catch it. And they told me what to do. And I caught it. And I'm like, oh, that was easy. And so I just went around and then caught all the big fish in in the city of Gridania, and then the city of Limsa, and Uldaw. The city itself doesn't actually have any big fish. But I finished out those logs and I was like, this is tickling the right parts of the brain. Let's just keep going. And I did all of Gridania, and then I did all of Lenosha, and I just kept going and going and going. And then the Ishgard Restoration came out, and it went all downhill from there.
So, has fishing always been a pretty big part of your life then?
In video games, fishing is something, like I was saying, something that I would trend towards, just because I like that, not like hyper casual, but like that, what I think would be referred to now as comfy gaming. That's something that I've always done, but I never really fished in real life as a kid. I would occasionally when I'd go out and visit my uncle. He would take me fishing, but that was maybe like 2 or 3 times. It wasn't until not this year, but last year, I started fishing in real life when I was like, hey, hold on, I'm an adult. I can buy a license and go fish. Like nothing's stopping me. And I just started, and so I'm in my 2nd year of real life fishing for realsies. So to answer your question, no, it hasn't been like a huge part of my life. But if you ask my parents, they would say yes, because I always loved aquariums. So take that as you wish.
So, of those fish that you're catching in real life, are you more of like a catch and release fisher, or are you
100%,
usually
yeah.
eating them?
No, I am fully catch and release unless legally I am not allowed to release the fish I caught, which really only applies to invasive species. So, like, I know what the local invasive species are. So if I ever catch one, and I haven't yet, but if I ever did, I would have to dispose of it as outlined by the law. But I always catch and release. And the weird thing is, I really don't like eating fish.
Really?
Yeah, I will. My wife will sometimes get like grilled salmon, and I'll take a bite of it and be like, that's good. Like I'll enjoy that. Like I'll take a couple of bites of it, but I don't think I would ever order myself like proper fish, like my own grilled salmon, if you will. I could not tell you how to fillet a fish properly. Like I couldn't do that. I can't. I just can't. Like I am not really equipped or prepared to just be like, yeah, I'll catch this fish and eat it too. I just catch it and release it, because for me, it's less about the sport of like, I caught something and now I get to eat it, and more of just, I'm just interested in what's living in the water, as weird as it sounds. So it's less of a sport, more of like a exploration, curiosity type drive when it comes to fishing.
So then you would say that you're less of a fan of fishing per se and more of a fan of like marine biology.
Yeah, I think it's less. It's a combination of both. Like I do enjoy fishing, going out and just kind of being by yourself on the side of a river. I found some local spots where it literally is just me. And it's very relaxing. But the science behind it too, of the ecosystem, the marine biology of it, is definitely an interest that I have. So it is something that I have recently also started to look at a bit more. Like I found this course online on Introduction to Marine Biology that I am taking. So I'm kind of peeking into that a little bit more, so that I'm more formally educated in it, beyond just kind of the education that I picked up in college in like basic biology or any of the other classes that I took.
I think that's really neat, because it's interesting seeing your interest in fishing literally evolving in real time.
It's been kind of fun to experience it in real time as well, because I know, like, we're pointing out a lot of stuff about like, oh, there's in Final Fantasy XIV, there's almost 1,500 fish, almost, and of, I think, like 99% of them, they're based on real life living or extinct i.e., previously living fish. And to me, that's just been really interesting to be like, oh, I just caught this fish in Ultima Thule called Space Bishop. What type of fish is this actually going to be in real life? And that was fun. That spent a couple hours down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out what this fish that we caught was, only to learn that it wasn't actually a fish per se. Space Bishop is based on something called Jenny Havers, which are dried skates, as in the fish skate, that is dried and shaped in such a way to look like a small demon or spirit and used in religious ceremonies in certain parts of the world, which was not what I was expecting. But that's kind of the thing that's always been really interesting to me, is all of these fish are based on real life fish, that they all have their own stories to tell, like in game. How close does that relate to what is going on in real life? And we've known this for a little while. We, being like the fishing community, have kind of been like, oh yeah, they're all based on real life fish. They all kind of mimic real life biological, ecological systems. But it wasn't until NA Fan Fest that we actually got that confirmed during the lore of creation, or the word of creation. I forget exactly what the name of the panel was. Where they were like, yeah, when we do fish lore, if it's a new species, the first time, that fish is getting a real life fish fact, and it's going to be tied to a real life fish fact. And then after that, we start doing the weird like fancy ones that are more fantasy based. But if they're like, this is the first time we're adding a Titan triggerfish, it gets a real life fish fact in its guide. And that's just, to me, like the coolest thing to find out. And because there's so many fish, and then because hasn't really been a lot of people looking at that, we'll catch like these little hints at things from like A Realm Reborn that tell the story of not only this real life fish, but also something in game. And then that little nugget of information appears in the game like years later. That just happened in the most recent Thalia raid, like that type of thing. Like, and that's, to me, has been really exciting to see progress as more and more people start paying attention to, as we're starting to now call it, fish lore.
That's awesome. And for those of you that don't know, there was actually a fish lore panel last year at LunarCon that Fruity Snacks was part of.
Mm-hmm.
And the video is on YouTube for those that want to go watch it. And it has some of the best animation of Bahamut blasting a fish you will ever find on the internet. Possibly the only animation of Bahamut blasting a fish you will ever find on the internet, too.
That was how the Bahamut, or as we called it, how the Baja Blast affected the trout population, was kind of the first moment for the community, I feel, when people started paying attention to fish lore. And it started as a joke. Like, somebody posted this artist named Ablissemo posted this image of basically this fisher during the Battle of Cartano, and Bahamut appearing from the moon Dalamud, and the fisher just going, this will affect the trout population. And I was like, did it actually? Like, do we actually have that in game? Because I'm like thinking like, oh yeah, Square Enix would totally add something like that. And a friend of mine, Beans McGee, pointed out, well, there's the warm water trout. And sure enough, if you read the warm water trout guide entry, it describes how it had an increase in population after the Battle of Cartano, after the 7th Umbral Calamity. And that just led down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out which other fish were affected by the calamities. And we've narrowed down 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to say 5 off the top of my head. I don't have the exact number. At least 5 different fish that have been called out as like this fish either saw an increase or decrease in population due to the Seventh Umbra calamity specifically. Warm water trout, Lanoshan jelly, Haratsuge sprag, shooting star, winter queen, like all these fish have all been affected. And that was kind of the kickoff for like the big rise in fish lore, and you see it more and more often now getting mentioned.
So I hope that everyone listening will take an interest in fish lore because it definitely seems to be rising in popularity.
It's wild what they do, and like I mentioned with the recent Thalia raid, they discovered the blow kiss reaction. So if you blow kiss a certain deity in that raid, you are attacked. You are given a unique attack. That unique attack is named after a fish, and the reasoning why you are attacked is outlined in that fish's name and its big fish version. So as soon as that was discovered, all the fishers were like just frothing at the mouth, like, "Oh my god, they did it! They added it!" And we just went from there. It's a 2.0. It's like a 2.x 2.3. I think it was added. These particular fish. So like, it's not like they added it in like 6.2 and then acted on it in 6.5. Like, no, this has been a 10-year thing that's bridging this gap.
And I noticed they did quite a lot of that in Endwalker, which was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
I love continuity things like that. Mind you, they had some non-continuity stuff too, and a bit of lore bending here and there, but it's really those small details from all the way back in like ARR that they added in Endwalker that made it really awesome.
Yeah, I think that like they tied up. I'm trying not to activate Endwalker doomerism because I don't subscribe to that. I will make my statement on that now. I think Endwalker did a pretty good job though of wrapping up the story and creating I don't want to say a fresh slate, but a new slate for the next arc to be told.
All right, so out of curiosity, as a member of the fishing community, are you guys already looking at fish from South America and making guesses? Is there betting going on? Is there?
Oh, yeah. 100%. There was a few fish shown in the Dawn Trail trailer, the Dawn trailer. And I've already had a couple of conversations with people where it was like, "Oh yeah, that fish is from Arizona." Like that's where that fish is from. This is a fish common in South America. Like all these different fish, and we were just like, "Yeah, okay, makes sense." And I know like with the FanFest reveal of like the newer zone that has been added, that everyone is lovingly calling Arizona. There was a lot of people who were like, "Oh yeah, well we might be able to catch this fish or that fish," and I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head, but like yeah, like those conversations have already happened, like almost immediately. We're like, "Oh, cool. I wonder what we're going to be able to fish there." Has been asked multiple times.
So something that I love that goes along with all of these real life based fish in 14, and something that is going to be talked about on this podcast later in the season, is all of the food recipes that you see these fish used for also obviously then come from these strong real world influences. And all of those foods and recipes also tend to have their own lore to go with them that end up stemming from the lore of the ingredients such as the fish that go in them. And it is a lot of lore crafting that it's all this detail that goes into things like fishing and the food in 14 that is really neat.
I know, like, we know for a fact, at least as of a few months ago, they have a team that is solely dedicated to non-combat content, and so they have it. It's not like it's not like you see in some other MMOs or RPGs where it's just like everybody's on the same team, but they're their jobs are spread out. Like, oh, one guy one day is doing design for combat, and then the next day he's doing design for fishing. Like, no, they have a dedicated team to non-combat content, and I think that really helps them it really helps them be able to focus on those types of stories, like those details that they get to tell. And I think also, like, shout out to the localization teams who also put in a lot of work to make sure that those stories are being told in a way that their native languages can also understand and appreciate. I think that that's something that also is a big standout for just Creative Business Unit 3 and the Final Fantasy XIV developers in general, is like the localization team isn't just localizing it to whatever, like they're not just translating what the Japanese teams are writing out. They're actually taking it, owning it, and making it work towards their region, which is what localization should be doing. And they do that very well. So I think that is a big point as to why we see so much of this, like, fish lore and all these details in the recipes and in the gathering items, like who can forget the Ishgardian salt rock, like all these different things.
Yeah. Even now, it's one of the things that really keeps Final Fantasy XIV intriguing to me is even if you get a little bored with the game, I mean, you can look at various things, for instance, lore of, fishing, lore of different regions, which is funny because obviously to get some of the most advanced fish, you need to get books called, regional lore books.
Yeah, tomes of folklore.
Which makes sense. It all ties into this conversation really nicely.
Yeah, and I think, like, with the folklore books and what we've been learning about just mythology and how it's presented in game, like in the world, the folklore tomes make much, much more sense. Rather than just like a on-off switch for catching fish, it's like actual stories of, oh, like these fishers are just sitting around a table saying, oh, well, I saw this fish and it was 10 feet long and it was blue with all these like weird little tentacles coming off of it. And I just imagine someone is in the back like, oh, write that down, and then sells that off to Warriors of Light.
And that makes sense. I mean, it's something that, so full confession, I don't do fishing in 14.
How dare
I
you?
do a lot of botany and a lot of mining. I don't do fishing. But especially in terms of fishing, I definitely think that makes sense because, just think about the real world. We have a bunch of fishermen on a pier sitting around, like you just said, going, let me tell you about this one time I saw this fish you guys didn't.
Mm-hmm. And I think to your point, like, fishing isn't for everybody. Like, I'm not going to, as much as be like, oh, you don't fish, blah. Like, it's not for everybody. That's kind of a thing that the fishing community as a whole has just kind of accepted. It's not going to be for everybody. It will always be a niche part of the game. We jokingly kind of just decided that Fisher was the limited job before limited jobs were a thing. Like, move over Blue Mage, Fisher was the first limited job because it gets that level of attention with the lore, with just the mechanics. It is extremely detailed and intricate, some of these mechanics. So yeah,
that actually makes complete sense to me. I am willing to accept that as canon.
Yeah, it like, we were just like, it's because it's so different from botany and mining.
Really is.
Despite what a lot of people would be like, oh, I want it to be like botany and mining. It's like, if you do that, you just completely gut the one thing that makes fishing interesting. Fishing should never, ever be like botany and mining. And I think the reason why we don't see fish used more in crafting recipes outside of like a handful at launch is because of that. Like they really want to make sure that it doesn't become super dependent, because then they'll have to move it towards botany and mining, and I don't think that they want to do that.
Just on a related safety note, please don't use your botany or mining equipment to try and catch fish.
Or we're not your dad. I won't stop you.
Who knows? Maybe if a scythe ends up being effective fishing equipment, you could revolutionize the entire way fishing is done.
See, this is where I would jump in and be like, you see, we already have a fish about that, but we actually don't. Not off the top of my head about someone trying to catch a fish with a scythe. That'd be really funny, though, if that actually already existed.
We have a new expansion coming out.
We do have a new expansion.
Give it time.
and we already have an idea of, like, obviously, like, going back to, like, what fish are we going to be able to catch? We saw, like, we've seen 2 of the zones. We saw the city, and we're like, okay, we're getting coastal fish, we're getting freshwater river fish, we're getting all this stuff, and we know for a fact we're getting salt lakes back. Salt lakes are a very unique ecosystem in Final Fantasy XIV. They only exist in the locks. There is one fishing hole that is for salt lakes, and so the fact that they're bringing that back is actually very exciting for fishers, at least as far as we can tell. There was a fish that they talked about at FanFest in North America where they were like, yeah, it's in a salt lake. I'm like, sweet, they're bringing back the salt lakes.
And it's that kind of eco-diversity that also just, it allows them to put more stuff in the game overall.
Yeah, we thought that with Endwalker, we didn't expect to get another trait for being able to fish into a specific fishing hole, because like we already can fish into freshwater, saltwater, salt lakes, magma, off of islands, into clouds, which is just 2 different forms of aerial fishing, aether chemical pools, and then we were like, well, what else are they and sand, dunes. What else could they be giving us? And then they were like, how about space fishing? How about you just you can go fish into space? We're like, okay, sure. So I have an idea based on what they were talking about of if they're going to add a new trait for fishing, like a new type of fishing hole. I have an idea of what it might be, but we won't really know until we see more about the game or when it releases.
So, as we wrap up part 1 of our interview, I do have to ask something still Final Fantasy related, but not quite 14 related. Now, a game came out a few years ago called Final Fantasy XV that is very well known for its fishing, to the point that it even has its own VR offshoot game that is literally just fishing. Are you a fisher in 15 as well?
I played a little bit of Final Fantasy XV. I got to the fishing part. I fished for a little bit and then didn't. I kind of stopped playing after that point. Through no fault of the game itself, I just got busy and had other things that I needed to do, and I just never finished it. So it's hard for me to say if I would have fished a bunch in 15, because I literally just completed the tutorial and stopped playing. So I'll have to go back and find out.
Well, if you do go back and try fishing in 15, please let me know how it goes.
Oh, I will.
I would be very curious.
It will definitely be known when I do that.
YouTube videos?
Could be.
All right. All right. Well, before we get into stuff about your YouTube channel and about the aquarium, we are going to take a little bit of a break, let our vocal cords rest, get some fresh tea and coffee, and we'll be right back. So thank you everyone for joining us for part 1, and we'll be back in a little bit with part 2 of my interview with Fruity Snacks.
Bye everyone for a few minutes.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second half of my interview with the wonderful Fruity Snacks. Over the break, it seems that he and the Fishermen of Tokyo reached an agreement. Fruity Snacks is in fact allowed to visit Japan now, but must stay on land and cannot be seen on shore with a fishing rod, which I think is fair. Your
Eh,
thoughts?
I think it's okay. It just means that I have one less bag that I have to check, one less thing to get lost in the air.
I
So
wasn't
works on
expecting
my
you
end.
guys to come to a resolution that quickly, but I'm glad for everyone's sake.
The power of the internet, instant communication.
Those emails, though, whew, that's a lot of stuff that I can't repeat on this podcast.
Yeah, definitely would need to add a rating to the pod. Would up the rating on this podcast if they were read out loud.
All I'm saying is that you can tell that all of you are fishermen by the language used, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on from that, I realized that I didn't ask you in part one. Aside from 14, I've also heard you on social media talk about fishing guides for World of Warcraft.
Not
Is
World of
that
Warcraft. No, Guild Wars 2. I actually have never. I played World of Warcraft for 12 levels in 2007, I think. That was the last time I played World of Warcraft, but I never genuinely played World of Warcraft. No, I did do fishing guides for Guild Wars 2 for a few things that I found people were asking about that I thought, this would be a good guide. I'd love to get back to it at some point, but that is a completely different beast that is just a completely different it would require a different approach that I just don't have time to take on right now.
so? The YouTube channel is sticking to 14 for the foreseeable future, then.
At least for the guides, when I stream, I might play some other like content, but it'll still be fishing. I have a couple of ideas, which will probably be in the past by now, but I know that there's been a few games that are fish related that I thought would be really fun to play. So I might play those on streams, but guide wise, we're staying in 14.
So, what made you decide to make these 14 guides in the first place? How did the YouTube channel come about?
It started about a little over 3 years ago now in the Fishcord, the Fisherman Horizon Discord. A lot of people would come in and say, "Hey, I'm going for X fish. What are the tips for it?" And people would say, "Here are the tips." And one day we got one specific fish. It might have actually been ninja beta, which might have been why I made that my first guide. I don't remember exactly what it was, but people like 3 or 4 times in the span of my afternoon, people would come in and say, "Hey, I'm trying to catch this fish. Any tips? Hey, I'm trying to catch the same fish. You got any tips?" And I was like, I've made guides in the past. I have experience, like my education background is in education, specifically online learning. I know how to make guides that are more than just typical YouTube guides. Why don't I do this for fishing and just do it for how to catch a fish? So that afternoon I mocked up a prototype and I shared it with the fish court and I'm like, does this work for everybody? And they're like, yeah, this would be great if we could have them for all these fish that we keep getting asked about. And it just started from there. I put out, I think like my first video was like September 23rd or something like that of 2020. And as of now, as of recording, I've put out 152 videos, most of which I think are guides to fishing in Final Fantasy XIV, whether it's explaining a mechanic, saying, here's how you catch a certain fish, or the surprisingly useful, here's how you find this obscure fishing hole that no one can find. Those are like the 3 big types of content that I'll put out for guides. But I've been doing that now for about 3 years. So I think that averages out to roughly a video a week for 3 years.
So I'm curious. I've noticed that in your videos, obviously you show quite a bit of Eorzea, and you show, you can catch the fish, and at the bottom it has these subtitles or captions or however you want to call it, various steps and how to go about catching them. When you're doing these essentially mini documentaries, has Morgan Freeman or David Attenborough ever contacted you about being included in these videos? Perhaps maybe, doing the voiceover for any of these guides?
No, but the question about would I do voiceovers for the guides has come up a variety of times, and I don't do it for a very specific reason, and it's not related to 14 or like YouTube or anything. It's, I guess technically it's two reasons. The biggest reason is I really hate editing audio. Genuinely not, like, that is the part of video editing I despise. I hate dealing with that. Not because I have to like listen to my own voice. That's not the part I don't like. It's just I don't like, the quality's never what I want it to be, and it just drives me nuts. For the other reason why I don't do that is it's kind of like split of, one, I don't actually need to. A lot of times when you get learning content, you don't want to, and this is just independent of guides, this is where my career kind of is starting to come into play here. When you are dealing with learning content, you don't want to overwhelm your learner. And that isn't just in terms of the content you're providing, but how that content is provided. So if I have a voiceover of me reading the captions that are at the bottom of the screen while something is happening on the screen, they are going to lose something. And so I stripped out the voice and left it to just text-based, and made a couple of other changes to the formatting to accompany that, and built it so that it was made in a way that you will never have to lose focus on what's going on. So you will always read the text, and then you will be shown it. So I will tell you what to do, but then you will see me doing it, and then repeat that over and over again. So it's the reason I don't do voice is because it's a bit better for learning. Like that's really it down in the end. And it's quicker. Like I think with my current workflow, I can go from catching a fish on camera to having it published in as fast as 90 minutes, depending on the fish. Sometimes quicker, sometimes longer, depending on if it's more complicated or not. But if I really needed to turn out a fish or a fishing guide, I could do it within a couple of hours. Like coming up, we have patch 6.1. I am already planning on, I think my goal is to have, assuming that the new relic step works the way that we're expecting it to, I'm planning to have that guide out within, like, before lunchtime, my time, like within 6 hours of it coming out, because I've made this workflow that's so quick. And part of that is not having to record audio. So I'm able to be a lot more agile, a lot more nimble. If I have to make changes to a video, which has happened a lot more than I care to admit, if I have to make changes, it's a whole lot easier for me to just go in, change the text, readjust some of the video a little bit, than it is to go in, change the text, re-record audio, because it's not going to sound the same as the original audio that I recorded. So I'd have to redo the whole thing anyways. It makes it a whole lot easier and lets me keep being agile with my channel, which I see my channel less as a typical YouTube channel and more of a learning resource for people who want to learn how to fish. So I structure it in a way that you probably wouldn't see on like someone who's doing video game stuff on YouTube for entertainment. I do it for education. So I have it a little bit structured a little differently. It's constantly changing to meet whatever needs I feel the community need, and I'm highlighting things that I feel like needs to come up. So it's an ever-changing platform for all this learning content that I'm making.
And for those that haven't checked it out, I really do recommend it, especially obviously if you do fishing in 14. Even if you don't do fishing in 14 and you're just considering checking out new content about parts of the game that you don't explore, it's definitely worthwhile.
I try my best to make it so that every guide, like someone can send you a guide, any guide, and whether or not you know what you're talking about with fishing or you're new to it, you're still able to get something from it and be able to actually feel confident to catch the fish that you're going after. That's my goal with that.
So, is there any particular part of fishing in 14 that you really enjoy? Spear fishing, boat trips, the various underwater vistas to visit?
Exploration. I think that that's kind of the big thing of fishing in Final Fantasy XIV will take you to places in the world that you typically don't go. Like the MSQ and side quests might take you there, but if it is, it's for like a few moments. Fishing will take you there and put you there for a while. Like not like hours, depending on the fish you're going for, but like it'll put you there at a very specific moment. Like Raktika during Raktika Great Woods during like umbral wind in the evening is actually very pretty. So it's really figuring out where the game is going to take us next and seeing where fishing is going to take us in the world. That's like one of the biggest draws to Final Fantasy XIV fishing for me. That and something that the fishing community calls quote unquote discovery, which every time a new fish is added to the game, which is every major patch at least. Sometimes it's every minor patch, like there's in the minor patches as well. So for 6.5, that series, we're going to get big fish in 6.5. We're getting the new fish for the Splendorous rods in 6.51. And then in January in 6.55, we're expecting to get the legendary fish for the expansion. Each of those will have a discovery period of some point and of some degree, because when a new fish is added, we don't know where it is. We don't know what it takes as a bait. We don't know if it has any special conditions, like does it only spawn during certain weathers or only during certain times of the day. We don't have that information, and you can't even data mine it. Like, so like that's not even a thing that we can do. So as a community, hundreds of fishers will just descend upon these fishing holes where we know that these fish are going to be, and we'll be like, okay, I fished from this time to this time during this weather, and the previous weather was this, and I'm in this fishing hole going for this fish with this bait. And they'll be like, I didn't get any bites of the new fish, and they'll record that. And there's one or two people who kind of tabulate all of that information and helps direct, oh, there's a rare window coming up in Thavnair where it's like rain into rain between 0 and 8 a.m. We should all go test this with this particular bait and really go through and find this. And so that is probably the most interesting, unique part of Final Fantasy XIV fishing that we do not see in any other game, is this big community event to go and find all these fish. And in 6.5, we found almost all of the 6.5 fish within like, I think it was like within 36 to 48 hours. The number 37 is sticking in my head, but that is ridiculously quick for a 6.5 patch or for a X.5 patch.
So it's not just like the members of Eorzean Aquarium going out. It is literally the entire fishing community conversing with each other, trying to figure out where are these fish.
It's a global event, like unofficial global event where people like, I will not do MSQ on major patch days because I would rather go fish. Like, I don't care if the world's in trouble. I need to go find this trout. I need to go help figure out where this thing is. And it's always a big celebration whenever someone gets the first recording of like, I have found this fish, and it is recorded. It's always a big deal whenever it's found. Some of us like to keep track of like how many world first catches we've gotten. I have only ever gotten one, which compared to some people is kind of low, but I'm pretty proud of that. So
which fish was it?
It was Lail crab. Which is a small pink crab that can be caught off of the docks in I'm going to butcher this name, Yelamod in Thavnair. It was me and a friend of mine were like, yeah, we'll go to that window, and we split like, all right, you do this bait, I'll do this bait, and I picked the right bait for the right window. and I caught it like within 3 or 4 casts of this window opening, and I recorded it. And as far as I'm aware, I was the first person to catch that fish in the game.
And see, this actually surprises me because obviously, due to it being highlighted by people like Frosty, everyone's aware of world first raids and world first clears. I didn't know that world first also applied to the fishing community, but that makes sense. And congrats.
It's not a big, like, we don't make a big deal about it because we aren't that, and I say we as in the community, aren't really that competitive. It's a very like communal thing. Like, we all understand, like, if someone comes in and says, I'm really struggling on this fish, somebody would be like, yeah, me too, buddy. I feel you. Like, we're all in this together type of thing. We don't really have that level of competitiveness. We have talked about keeping track of that, but we were like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel right. So it is a thing that if somebody wants to keep track of it themselves, like I was like, yeah, I got a world first on this one fish. I'm good. I don't need to go for another one because it's communal. So everybody is, if I start trying to go for world firsts, then I'm not sharing data with the community, which goes against what the community is about. And that's not good. So we just don't end up doing that. And
I think that's really neat that that you have this cohesion within a subsection of the community.
It's not impossible because people did it before we started organizing this big event, which would have been back in like 5.2 or 5.3. Like, this idea of a discovery period is still relatively new. Beforehand, there was a lot of small subsections of the community would keep track, and they would record what they found, and it wasn't super accurate. But it wasn't until 5.2, 5.3 when me and another guy sat down and we're like, let's formalize this. Let's create a spreadsheet of all the new fish. We'll put out the bait, we'll put out the weathers, we'll say, here's how many we've had tested. We're doing heat maps. We're all data nerds. So like we're geeking out over all this stuff. And we were able to figure out, like, okay, by collecting all this data, we can now keep track of where we need to look. And I haven't been leading that since 5.4-ish. I handed it over to the other guy, and he has been orchestrating the use of the spreadsheets every time, and saying, here's the rare weathers that are coming up. Here's where we need more people testing. This might be a likely window. We need people testing a wide variety of bait. And then people will be like, okay, bait check. And that we have emojis now in the Discord where it'll be like, all right, if you're going to be at this window for this fish, what bait are you going to use? And people will just react with the bait they're going to use, so that people can now communicate and balance it out and be like, okay, we're making sure that not one person, making sure that like not one bait is being used solely during the test, and we're making sure that there's a wide enough spread. And people are like, there's absolutely no way it's going to be this bait, but we need data on it, so I'm going to do it anyways.
At least that's awesome that there are people that are willing to try anyway, just to be sure.
Like I said, I got my one world first crab catch. I'm pleased with that. I am always happy to take the off bait, as I would call it, like the bait that isn't the anticipated bait, because we have, just through trends, through basic understanding of like the zone's ecology, going back to what I was saying, I think in part 1, where like, oh, we know that this fish is going to be an alligator, so we know that it's going to probably want this type of bait versus another type. We're able to get an idea of what it might be, but we're never sure until it's caught. And so I'll always take the one that like, I'll take the expensive bait that maybe people don't want to do, or I'll take the bait that is probably not going to happen, but I'll do it anyways. Like, that doesn't bug me at all whenever I'm helping out.
That's what I think is also really good about fishing in 14, is like we talked about in part 1. I think that if you did know for sure what bait before the fish, was and it was more like botany, I think you just find it dull.
Yeah, I think that was like when they made an update to the fish guide where they were adding in like catch information, or they not catching information, like information about the fish into the guide. Like we were like, oh crap, are they going to say like the conditions for it? Because if they did, that would have just destroyed a lot of that community. But they didn't. And it actually ended up, because they added that, and because somebody found an old copy of a book from Heavensward, like that era, on it was like a guide on the disciples of land and disciples of hand. In that book, they actually listed out like dozens of fish and their exact conditions. And we ended up calling it the book incident. And this book outlined, it was like, this fish is apparently supposed to be always up. We don't believe that. This fish has a weather condition because the game says so now. And we tested it and the game was wrong. So we actually found this bug that had been in game for 10 years that we ended up finding because of this discovery period that we had. And we were finding that like they're typically fish end on either the half hour, so like 1:30 or like 3:30, or they end on the hour, like 1, 2, 12, 10. But we found that there is a variety of fish that end on the 45th minute and the 5th minute and the 15th minute. And they're all and the ones that we know for sure are all in A Realm Reborn in Heavensward, because that's where the book was from. But we were looking, someone was translating it because it was in Japanese, and he was like, here's all the fish that we need to check. It was like 20 fish that we had to go and re-verify. And it turns out, like, yeah, the book was right. This fish doesn't actually end at 1 o'clock in the morning. It ends at 1:05 in the morning. And it's that level of specificity that we always try and get now.
It's amazing.
We didn't see any of the trend, like that specific trend in later fish yet. Like I looked through some of the data that we did have, and I didn't see anything that made me go, maybe this one ends at like 15. We haven't seen that yet. So we haven't really gotten it, but it kind of terrified us that, oh crap, there's a chance now that this fish could only have this fish, like we could say like, oh, this fish is only up from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. when in fact it might only actually be up from like 11:15 to 2:45 type of thing. Like, oh, that fear that struck some fear into us now, because it makes it even harder to get really accurate data and really accurate numbers, which is what we as a community strive to have when it comes to conditions, bait usage, when you like which fish should you use surface slap on. Like all of these things are things that we get really, really attentive over in making sure that we have this really specific data. So hopefully now, whenever you look on like the Carbuncle plushie tracker or Teamcraft or any of my guides or anything that you find in the fish court in terms of resources, is going to have that level of detail now when it comes to it. And a lot of resources outside of our community wait for us to finish before updating their content to make sure that they're getting accurate numbers, because fishing is so nebulous. It's so deep that it's really easy to get information wrong and not realize it.
So I'm curious. Obviously, some fish in 14 are a lot harder to catch than others. Some fish famously have days between their spawn times.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a fish that made you have a Captain Ahab that you were like, someday I will catch this fish?
There has only ever been one fish that made me go full Captain Ahab, and it was a fish added in 5.3 or 5.4, and it was called Pearl Pipra in the Raktika Great Woods. I spent a lot of time working on discovery for that. It's caught in the Red Chalice, which is the name of the fishing hole, just to the northwest of Slitherbrow. And I easily spent probably 10, 15 hours over a week trying to test and like get that fish, maybe even longer in the long term. And I knew I sat through windows when I was testing it, and it would never bite for me. It took me months before I finally got that. And when I say months, there was a break in there. So it was maybe like 30 attempts at the window before I actually got it, which is the longest that it's ever taken me to catch any single fish.
But you got it, and that's what matters.
I did in the end. It took me a while, and I was very grateful to get it. And then when I recaught it on my alt, it only took like 5 windows. So I was very thankful for that.
That's how it seems to go with alts. Like there was stuff that with Nobutaka I felt took ages, and then on my alt I was just like, oh, the spawn's right there. Cool. Okay.
We're done. We got it. I mean, some of it is, a lot of fishing at its core is RNG. So like that's what you're expecting. But a lot of the skills that you are given for fishing allows you to manipulate that RNG in your favor. So instead of it being like 100% RNG, it comes down to like a far less percentage. And the biggest skill a fisher can have is knowledge of the window and of the fish, which is why this is why I try and be as accurate as I can with my guides and to be as comprehensive as I can so that when people go in, they know, okay, this is how long I need to be casted out. If it takes longer than 18 seconds for this fish, for anything to bite, I need to cast back out again because I know that the fish that I want isn't going to be biting. And so I think that that's kind of another thing that makes fishing and just fisher as a job very unique is the skill ceiling isn't based on how well you use your skills. It is based on how well you know the environment, which we know is a pivotal, I don't want to say pivotal, is a pillar of the design philosophy behind the fisher job in the game.
So something that I want to shift gears and talk about as we get into the later part of this interview is you're very well known for your project. For those who are listening who don't know what that is, tell us what is Eorzean Aquarium?
Okay. I was going to say you cut out right before you said Eorzean Aquarium, but I was guessing that was what you were asking. Your voice died on my end. The Eorzean Aquarium is a house in Marlborough, Lavender Beds, Ward 16, Plot 59. It is a small house, and it holds, I think we just passed 200 individual species of aquarium fish. It is one of 2 houses in the game across all the regions that has every single aquarium fish on display in a single house. And the second house being the Eorzean Aquarium on Spriggan on the European region. That one also has every aquarium fish on display, and we have one on Sophia, but that one does not have everything on display. It is kind of growing over time with the OCE community.
So ultimately, is the goal to have one on every data center?
If you had asked me that a year ago, I might have said, yeah, that would be cool. Emphasis on the might. I think now the Eorzean Aquariums have become kind of a community center for fishing, and their goals, among many others, is to really be there to support the community. And it's difficult to achieve that goal when you don't really know the community that you're building in the first place. So as much as I would love to be able to build an Eorzean Aquarium on like Tonberry, and I'm not saying that I'm not going, that I'd like that this is completely out of the question, But I will say, if we do that, we would really want to make sure that what we build was built by the local community and supports whatever that community wants to do, specifically the fishing community. That's kind of become, like I said, like a big part of the aquarium's mission in game. And so I don't want to make it on like the Japanese data center, because that's the last data center that we don't have yet. We don't have a venue on yet. I don't want to just make it on the Japanese data center to be like, we have one on every data center now. I want to make sure that if we're going to be making it, it actually has an impact. It is actually used. It is useful, and can truly support the community that it's going to be a part of.
I think that's really neat, and that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that people have started using this project as a hub to gather around, because I feel like when you have something like that, it allows new people to more easily enter these communities and lets it grow.
Yeah, that's something that we've found. Like, we have like written evidence of people being like, I didn't know fishing was this fun. I didn't know there was a community around fishing. I didn't know that there was this many aquarium fish. Like, I want to go and get this myself. I have to learn how to fish. We didn't really, when we first launched the aquarium, like when I first came up with the idea, it was almost as a joke. And it was originally, we were just going to be like, we're going to open our doors and we'll just let the housing community know that we are here, because we were going to be a resource for the housing community, because there was no good way to see fish in the aquariums in game for builds. And some of these fish are really expensive, and you don't want to buy a fish just to test it out, because you can't preview them either. And so we opened up on May 1st of 2022, and a few of us were there, and we were like, yeah, we'll hang around. It was a Sunday night. I was like, yeah, I'll hang around until my tabletop game comes up. And we were expecting like 50 people that night. We got 50 people in the first like 5 minutes. It just blew up. And from there, we were like, okay, we're going to be more than just a resource for the housing community by force. Like, it wasn't like, we kind of just were like, okay, people wanted to use the aquarium, so now we are going to support the people who want to use the aquarium. And that's the role that we'll play. And so we've been doing that for years now. And that's why we set up an aquarium on Europe and on Oceania as well.
So when you say we, who all is involved with this project?
It is volunteer players from all over the world who have come and contributed either their crafting ability, in-game resources like money, or rare items they've donated, or they've given their time to help out with events. They've leveled up an alt that can make an FC room. That's kind of the FC room is what makes the aquarium work, basically. And you have to be like level 50 in a job. You have to reach like grand company rank of second lieutenant and all this other stuff. So it's like, it's not a quick setup to get a new room running. Like, there's at least 10 hours of work that goes into it just before you can even buy the room. And it's probably, I think we're around 110 people, I think now, who have volunteered just for aquarium stuff across the world. And there's a lot of people who, like, I'm based on North America, and I have a room. I helped out with a room in Europe and one in Oceania. A lot of people who were in Europe have helped out with Oceania, or like vice versa. So that's kind of who is here. And it's not all fishers too. There's housing enthusiasts. There are people who just think it's a really cool project and want to support it that way. It's really become this like beacon for people who just want to do something new and different in the game.
So last year, I actually had the pleasure of taking people who Don't do fishing in 14. Don't do a lot of home decorating. I took them to the aquarium on Marlborough, and they got to see the aquarium for the first time. We were all in a big voice chat, and the reactions were great. Like, they, admittedly, one of them was really flipping out because she was just like, wow, I've never seen this many fish in one place. This is amazing that someone took time to do this. What is the feedback that you usually get about the aquariums? What is the reaction that people usually have?
The biggest reaction we probably get is from Lalafell players who thank us for adding stools. Like, straight up, I'm not joking. That was like, we didn't have them at launch, and then someone was like, you should add stools for Lalafells, and I'm like, that's a really good idea, and so we did.
The small touches, just like we talked about with lore. It's the small things.
A lot of people just really appreciate that it exists. Like, that's kind of the thing. When I first put it together, I was trying to make. I didn't intend to originally make the aquarium. Like, my goal was to just make like a house that the community could use for like a center point for fishing on North America. Actually, at the time, it was on Crystal because we didn't have data center transfer. Originally, I was just like, the goal is just to have like a player ran fishing guild in a way. And then I was like, oh, hey, yeah, let's just make it like we could, and I think my exact line was, an enterprising FC could use FC rooms to bypass the tank limitation, because you can only have a certain amount of fish tanks in a house based on its size. And that was coming at a time when we were still coming out of like the big pandemic. Everyone was in lockdown. On Crystal, at least, there was like a ton of clubs and casinos were advertising all over the place, and people were just really annoyed by that, myself included. And so the fact that we put this together and put it out and it just exists is a thing that a lot of people appreciate, because it shows there can be other things besides clubs and casinos. Like, there can be other venues in the game that don't alienate people, that don't make people annoyed or feel like gross or something. And I think that that's like the biggest piece of feedback that we get is just thank you for making such a cool project.
So I feel I have to ask, and for anyone listening, I'm sorry if this crushes your dreams. Are you saying that we should not expect an Eorzean Aquarium billboard?
No, I wouldn't expect a billboard. Ironically, the billboard was probably one of the this is a bit of a side story. The billboard, if anyone remembers this happening,
it's hard to forget.
It is hard to forget, but if you didn't know, one of the in-game clubs bought 2 billboards in the southwest of the United States. Well, I think one was in California, like the other was in Texas or something, to advertise their summer bash to celebrate cross DC travel that was happening. And we had just announced our cross DC event, or our cross DC travel event, which was a Namazu hide and seek type open house thing where we hid stuffed Namazus in the exhibits, and people had to go and find them. And if they could say where they were, they won a prize. So we announced that, and then the billboard stuff broke. Like, the news on that broke, and it just blew up. Like, I mean, if you were around when that happened, or even if you weren't, you might have heard about it. The billboard thing just went nuts. And when we released our announcement, I made like a little trailer. Like, I always try and make little like short 20-second skits, 30-second skits, videos for our big events. And so I did one, and we were still like hugely known at the time. And the comments on the video were like, this is how you're supposed to do advertisement, over and over again. And we're just grilling the billboard club in our announcement. And so it ended up being that some other people's misfortune ended up being our fortunateness. I'm words lost me there.
English.
English is hard. It ended up benefiting us that they did what they did, because everyone was like, see, this is bad, but this aquarium thing is good. This is what you're supposed to do. And we saw a huge turnout to that event. I think over the night we easily had like 120 to 150 people
Oh, that's awesome.
just complete the event, not just show up and look around. We probably had 200 250 people who were there.
So do you guys end up having to change the guest books pretty often?
Yes, we learned very quickly that you can only have, oh gosh, I forget how many it is, like 50 or 60 messages in a book. We didn't know that the night that we opened. Somebody messaged me and they were like, hey, by the way, your message book is full. I'm like, your message book can get full? What? How do we handle this? And we had to change on the night that we opened. We had to clear out the message book every probably 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And we would clear it from like page 10 down to page 3. And it was like that for a few days after we opened.
Did you actually take time to read the messages though?
We do.
Good.
We do. Yeah, we do. And what we do now is, and I should say we do this now. We have done this the entire time, at least 99% of the time. A few may have slipped through the cracks, especially during the opening week. We catalog every single message book entry that we get. We have a channel in our Discord that volunteers can access that is solely for posting screenshots of the message books before they get cleared out. And I could not tell you how many posts are currently in that, but it is probably close to 1,000 with multiple images and pages worth for not just our lobby book, but each of our individual rooms have message books as well that needed to be cleaned out. So it is thousands upon thousands of messages, and we go through and we read them. We even have a channel that is public facing where we highlight some of our favorites or ones that we just want to make comments on. But no, we do, like, and all of the aquariums will do that.
Because from my experience, I mean, it's really important. One, because as the host and as the people working on the project, it's always really nice and uplifting to get those messages, but also because a lot of those messages, a lot of the times, tend to be very heartfelt messages. It's not just like, oh, cool. It's, some of these messages people really, really do put thought into. And so I think it's great that you guys catalog and go through all of them. And also, I'm sure it's probably great for you guys to look back on later.
It's great because it really is a big motivator for us and just for a lot of people. Like, I know some folks are like, I've had a really bad day, but I read some of these messages in the book today and I feel a lot better. The night that we opened, I don't recall if any of us ever saw this person, but somebody left a message in the message book that said, I wanted to go to an aquarium before the pandemic, but I'm sick now and I won't be able to go to one because I'll get even more sick. So this has let me experience an aquarium that I wouldn't have been able to go to at all. And I'm paraphrasing because this was last year and I don't remember exactly what they said, but it was something to the effects of that. And someone pointed that out in the message book, and like 4 or 5 of us were on the call, and like half of us were like tearing up because we were like, okay,
I about teared up with you saying that. That's really powerful.
We were like, this is it. We have succeeded at what we wanted to do. It doesn't matter what happens after this. We're done. Like, that's it. Like, we have achieved. We have met the achievement. We are done. Anything that happens afterwards is just going to be icing on the cake because of that one comment, that one person who was just like, you've given me the opportunity to do something that I couldn't do in real life. And we will constantly bring that message back up every so often, be like, oh, why are we doing this? Why should we do it this way? Oh, because of this one person. These are the people that we are targeting. These are the people that we want to make feel welcomed. But I apologize for the background noise here.
It's all good. I had to turn my mic off for a sec. I was like, I'm getting a little teary-eyed thinking about it, because no, that is really powerful. And it's always nice when you have a project that can really touch someone's heart like that.
And I think it was coming out of the pandemic, something that a lot of people were really appreciative of. I should say, when I was putting together the plan for the aquarium when we first started the project, which the whole thing only took, because a lot of people ask this, the whole thing only took 28 days to build from start to finish. But in that time when I was planning it, I have a little experience in like exhibit design for museums. I have a little bit of experience in like curation and designing museum exhibits. And so I poured as much of that knowledge as I could into the aquarium and the workflows that we use to create rooms and design them and put them all together, to make it feel like not just like just a house in a video game, but like this was truly something that could exist in the world. Like this is something that could exist in the world of Eorzea and fit within the lore of the game per se. And that's something that we continue to do as well. Is like when we put together a new room, we really try and make it feel like it's like if it's the Fish of Thavnair, that room is going to feel like you're in Thavnair. It's going to have a story behind it to explain why it's like that. We've had the first room we added after launch was our touch tank, because that was like one of the most requested things that people wanted. So I spent an entire week trying to figure out, how do we make a touch tank in a game where people can't actually touch things? You can't even interact. Like you can't click something and focus it to be able to interact with it. Like you can't even do that. How do we figure this out? And I ended up just saying, here's what I think we need to do, and here's the story behind it. And we create stories much like the fish in the game. Each of these rooms and these exhibits have a story behind them to explain why they're set up the way that they are.
Personally, in my opinion, I think that you guys did an amazing job. I think that anyone who's listening to this who hasn't checked out Eorzean Aquarium, please do. Not as soon as possible, at your own leisure, because it is something that you want to take, when you feel you have time and you want to have fun with it. But
we're not going anywhere. Like that's the thing. Like we're not going anywhere.
It really is a fantastic experience that, if you can't tell from this interview, the people involved with it, the fishing community in 14 have worked very hard on, and it shows. And
I will, just to kind of like a slight cap on that, it is big. Some people can take, at minimum, I think we're now down to like, if you speed run through the aquarium, it's like 30 minutes still.
Yeah, there's a lot.
We give tours. So if people like, we'll have groups and say like, hey, can we have a tour of the aquarium? We've gotten to the point now where it'd be like, do you want a tour of all 30 rooms in the aquarium? Because that'll take 5 hours. Or do you want one of these special shorter tours like Fish of the 12, man-eating fish, all these other like prehistoric fish? Like those are like 3 of the tours that we offer. Or do you want one of those, which can take about an hour or 2? Still, make sure you have a little bit of time if you want to do it all in one go.
And as I understand it, Eorzean Aquarium is actually part of a larger network, right?
Yes. So the Eorzean Aquarium is actually the reason and kind of the anchor for the idea of another thing that I founded called the Eorzean Museum Network, or EMN for short. The Eorzean Museum Network is a collective group of in-game venues that, through one way or another, present some aspect of the game, its stories, its lore, its creatures, in a curated, organized way. We have a set of guidelines, so we don't look for quality per se, but we do look for a set of like, are you doing this? And we've let me go back. The aquarium was kind of the catalyst to start this off, because I was like, we needed, we had heard from a lot of people saying, man, I wish there was an easier way to find more venues like this. And we were like, well, we know some, like we have this aquarium over on Spriggan, or there's another museum over here. And so we decided to put them all together under one umbrella called the Eorzean Museum Network. And with these guidelines, players can submit their venues. And if it matches those guidelines and like we verify, like, yeah, you're doing that right, you can join up and you can be a part of the network. And not only, it's not like you just get added to a card and that's it. We do group events, like with all of our venues. You get access to the network's resources. So if you are making a museum and you're like, I want to expand, I need money for a bigger house, we can help you get that. I need this rare item, we can help you get that. Like, those are things, because we have all these people that came from the aquarium and that were like, I want to help craft, I want to help more venues like this, how can I do that? And so we kind of turned all of that motivation and that power and that resource onto EMN. And we're now at 20 plus museum networks, or museums across the world. I think we have, I'm looking at my card here now for that. 1, 2, 3, 21. We have 21 museums across all data centers. And we have stuff from like botany museums to art museums to like just museums representing Norvrand. All of these different houses and all these different communities have come together under this one umbrella to kind of just show, like, there is more to this game than just clubs and casinos. And that was what we ended up doing a lot of with EMN when we were first getting started. It was like, hey, if you're looking for something else, why not try us out? So everyone who joins, like I said, you would get access to all of our resources. You get access to the collective knowledge that the aquarium and other museum members have. You can talk to other leads. You can talk to other creators. And I will go to your venue. I will record footage of it and we'll edit it into a little trailer, like I don't want to say like professional trailer, because I don't consider myself a professional video editor, nor the person who helps me with video editing as well. But we put it into a nice trailer. Like, you're given a nice quality trailer that's consistent. We do that all for you. Like, you don't have to do, you just have to sign up and you automatically get a trailer. We announce it in our Discord. We announce it on our Twitter. We'll announce it on our Tumblr and Instagram whenever we get those set up, which is my fault for getting those set up yet. But not the point. We offer a lot because we really want to show that that we're, one, serious about this, and two, there's more to this game than just clubs and casinos. You can go to a museum if you want. And so we are almost 1 year old now, and 21 museums are part of the network, including the Eorzean Aquarium.
Do you have a link that I can put in my show notes for our listeners?
Yes, I will drop that into a Discord for you.
I appreciate it, and I'm sure they'll appreciate it too. Also, for anyone who, might need a free company event idea or something to take a significant other to in 14, you now have options.
The Eorzean Aquarium was voted one of the best date night spots in the game.
See, there you go. Helping with problem solving.
And if you are like, hey, my FC would love to be able to go to like all of the, this is one of the guidelines for joining, for becoming a member, is you are a nonprofit, which means you do not ask for an entry fee, and you are open 24/7. So you can go to the card that will be in the show notes, and any of those museums you can go to, and they'll be open. You can explore. I've walked into the aquarium a few times, or the Nature Museum, which is my personal house. And I'll run into people and they'll be like, 4 or 5 people from a small FC. And they're like, yeah, we're doing a museum night and we're hitting up 4 or 5 different museums from your card. So if you ever want to do anything with any of the museums, like you can let us know either in our Discord or you can message me directly, and I'll get you in touch with whoever you need to make that work. Because that's the big thing. The museum network, the aquarium are here to support the community and what the community wants to do.
And I'm really glad that you guys are here because I've been to a lot of those venues and I can vouch they are pretty amazing.
We do a lot to make sure, like, not really to make sure, but we do a lot to work with the people who have created this to help make sure that they can achieve the vision that they want to achieve with whatever they want to do. Like, even if you have an idea for a museum, you're like, I want to make this museum, but I don't have a house, or I don't know how to do this, or I don't have enough money. If you submit an application, we will review it. It might take a couple of weeks for us to get to it, but we'll review it. And me or my co-lead on this will reach out to you and be like, hey, tell us more about what you want. How can we help? And see if that's something that we can actually support.
This has been an awesome interview. I really appreciate that. I know you're really busy. We both are. We've had several DMs about our conflicting schedules over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which makes me all the more appreciative of you being able to do this today. As we reach the end of our interview, I've obviously asked you quite a bit. And we've talked about fishing, we've talked about the aquarium. Do you have any questions for me?
You mentioned, hey, this is something that I do at the end of the podcast, and you always say that, and I'm always surprised by it. And you've said it at least 2 or 3 times now because I keep forgetting. But I would ask, and this is a question that I ask everybody when they're like, give me a question. What is your favorite type of cookie?
Okay. So, for the record, I prefer my cookies soft rather than hard. I know that everyone has a bit of a preference when it comes to, how solid do you like your cookie. I am actually a really big fan of large, soft cookies, and specifically snickerdoodles.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're good. We're good. I'm a big fan of the large, soft sugar cookies, which are basically snickerdoodles without cinnamon.
Well, see, longtime listeners of this podcast will notice that a lot of times when I talk about what drink I have for the podcast, it's usually cinnamon coffee. Anything with cinnamon, I am of the firm belief that there are 2 things in this world, cinnamon and ginger, and you can never have too much of either of them in a recipe, ever.
I would probably agree with that, yeah. And I think I get a second question, right?
You do.
If you had to narrow it down right now, what is your favorite singular, like 30-second moment of at any time in a story or a side quest or a raid in Final Fantasy XIV?
See, that's one of those things. Seconds. I'm glad that we do post editing in case I'm here for the next half hour trying to think up an answer. Because that would be quite the list.
Well, you can only pick your favorite, and it has to be like 15 to 30 seconds.
Okay, so I'm going to take a minute, and because there is a particular scene that comes to mind, and I don't remember specifically when it happens.
I can hear you furiously typing away on your keyboard right now.
Because I'm doing a lot of Googling, trying to figure out when this took place. I know it wasn't... It probably couldn't have been Shadowbringers. I know it wasn't Endwalker. I want to say it was Stormblood. Give me 1 sec.
I'm sure in post-edit, the long silence that's going to be happening right now is going to be edited down for your convenience. But if not, listener, thank you for listening to the show.
Oh, I'm going to keep a bunch of this silence in just so everyone understands how hard I'm trying to look to find this. But unfortunately, dear listener, I don't have the patience and I don't want to waste your time. So, forgetting when it was in 14, I'm going to say Stormblood because I think that's it. There is a point in 14 where, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Stormblood. You and Alize have this really nice chat about just life. And I know that's very nondescriptive, but I really enjoyed it. There's just this moment in 14, and I believe Stormblood, where you and Alize sit down and you talk about things, and she talks about her hopes, and it's this really touching bonding moment. And
See,
I just thought it was the coolest scene.
there was a point like that at the beginning of Endwalker as well, where you and her just get coffee and talk about Labyrinthos for a hot second. That's the only time I remember that. I can't help you on anything else beyond that.
It's okay. I'm blanking really hard on it too. And I know that people are going to hear this and then later on be like, I know exactly what, here's the video. But it's not when the two of you. No, I remember. I remember now what it was. The two of you are in Az's Law, and
Oh
you're having a
yeah.
chat.
Yeah, I remember that one now.
And I really liked that moment because it was very touching.
I remember that.
Okay. So, brief note as we finish up the episode. I was actually really expecting you to ask my favorite fish or if I had an aquarium. So, I actually had that pulled up. And so I'm going to go ahead and answer my own question. And the answer is the grip killifish.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I actually, on my desk in my free company room, have a one fish aquarium with a grip in it.
A small fish, little dinky fish caught out in Lenosha. Yeah,
It's very cute. I like it.
they're very fun. Yeah. For a while, for some of the Lenosian rooms, we used those as quote unquote filler fish, so that like a tank didn't look super empty. If like we only needed this tank only needed one, we used either like copperfish and grip killifish.
I would have accepted a tank full of them, but obviously I have a bias.
Well, you can with a tier 4 aquarium.
That's true. That's true. So, obviously, now that we're at the end of the interview, I want to ask if people want to know more about fishing or need a guide to get to the fishing Discord or want to know about the various museums across Eorzea, is it okay for them to contact you on X or Twitter or whatever?
Yes, you can.
Or do you have a preference?
You can find me on Twitter which is at FisherFruity. I think I'm also on Tumblr under the same name. I'm not on Blue Sky right now, but maybe in the next 6 months I might be. Or you can join the Eorzean Museum Network Discord, which you'll find in the Eorzean Museum Network card. You'll find a link to that. Or you'll find me over at the Fishcord, which is discord.gg/fishcord. You'll be able to find me there. So pick whichever one is most relevant to what you need. But I'm always happy to do what I can to answer questions related to fishing or help your FC figure out where to go for an FC night out. Any of those types of things I'm always happy to help with.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
And thank you for inviting me.
For those listening, that is the end of the interview. And obviously, I'm going to say goodbye to Fisher Fruity, and then I will catch you all in the outro.
Bye, everyone. Happy fishing.
A big thank you to Fruity Snacks for coming on the podcast. Like I mentioned in the interview, we both had pretty hectic schedules, so I'm glad we got to coordinate this. I also learned quite a bit about fishing in Final Fantasy XIV from him, and while I'm not sure about going to 90 with it, I do think I'll try and get a few more levels on at least one of my characters. I'm sure those of you who tuned into Season 1 of the podcast noticed not only the lack of doorbell noises, but also the new break music between segments. That was provided by Spaceroast, and is a clip of his mix of the song Unity from Final Fantasy XI. I hope you enjoyed it. I also want to say thank you to everyone who watched my LunarCon panel this year about content creation in 14. Either in person or on Twitch or YouTube, I really appreciate you all checking it out. The turnout was certainly better than I had expected, and the support was just amazing, guys. I gotta be honest, I spent Saturday feeling like a bit of a rock star. After the anxiety of, hosting a panel at LunarCon, of course. But my first LunarCon panel and my first time being a host there was awesome. And I got to take so many screenshots over the weekend with friends and fans and other content creators. Next year they are rebranding as AetherCon, and I really recommend checking it out. I can pretty much guarantee you'll see me there. Finally, I know I posted this on social media already, but I really like the game Fall Guys and am really enjoying the in-game collaboration. I know people have had a bit of issue with server lag, but taking that in stride, I find it to be pretty fun. If anyone has a character on the North American servers and wants to run the Fall Guys collaboration content together, let me know. We can totally talk on X or Tumblr and Blue Sky and other social media, and we can try and coordinate a time. I'd really love to do that with you guys. Well, with all that having been said, and reaching the 2-hour mark for this episode, I think I've kept you here long enough. Until next episode, I hope you all stay safe, and I'll see you next time with a warm drink and wonderful guests. Take care.